So the only reason why Nazis call themselves socialists is just to appeal to the general public? Yes. Yes. This is why I've always been particularly fearful of the dangerous propaganda coming from the Tucker Carlsons of the world, who understand that there is left populism, who understand that there is a lot of momentum for left populism, and will use it to drive home their dangerous agenda of nationalism. All over the place. Okay.
Episode is brought to you by Audible. Start the timer. I've got like 20 minutes tops to cover socialism, communism, corporatism, fascism, Nazism, the Great Depression, German politics under the Weimar Republic.
This is Were the Nazis Socialists by Second Thought.
The Third Reich, and of course, Hitler. So we genuinely have no time to spare. This video won't cover every aspect of the Nazi regime, that'd be impossible, but rather make a pretty limited argument with as much evidence as I can fit in this video. That argument is that the Nazis were not socialists. Let's jump in. There's a good chance you've heard that the Nazis were socialists. They were not. But that hasn't stopped Crowder from saying it before, nor does it stop Shapiro, and D'Souza even got to say it on PragerU. And as much as that would make it seem like this take is limited to online dweebs, real-life dweebs are just as guilty. Somehow, this take has made its way to Congress,
National Socialist German Workers' Party,
and the EU.
It's so funny because it's like, I guess Night of the Long Knives was just leftist infighting. That's what was going on. Classic. Those classic socialists that openly, actively murdered socialists.
Parliament, where this happened.
that Nazis were national.
Let me tell you something, okay? If the Nazis were actually fucking socialists, liberals would not have capitulated to them, okay? Liberals would have fought them tooth and nail. As a matter of fact, that's precisely what they did with the actual socialists and the communists and the trade unionists, as a matter of fact. So that's how you know those motherfuckers were not socialists, okay? But there's also a lot of, a lot of things that the Nazis did that is anti-socialist in general, and we'll talk about that too.
National Socialists. It's a strain of socialism. So let's not pretend it's...
As you just heard in that clip, usually the argument for calling the Nazis socialists boils down to, well, it's in their name. Nazi is short for this, which in English translates to this. And because it says socialist right there, this is supposedly enough proof that the Nazis were socialists and that therefore socialism is evil. It's a take on par with running to a public bathroom and snacking on that little blue puck because it has cake in its name. But there's a lot wrong
Yummy, tasty
with this take, and it starts with the problem of definition. Conservative.
That's a good one too, bro. Poo in shampoo doesn't mean there's poo in it. Yeah, I mean, look, you can also ask liberals if they think the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is democratic. That's the one that that's the one that immediately causes people to go, okay, maybe that's not the case, you know?
Don't know, or more likely, purposefully obscure what socialism is, since that allows them to use the term for anything they want. Usually, to equate it with the most destructive political regime the world has ever seen. So, let's actually define socialism. Socialism is a society in which the means of production are held in common. Lots of jargon there, so let's clear it up. Under capitalism, our current economic model, the means of production are held in private. Factories, businesses, and all the other industries that produce things and services of value for society are owned by individuals or a small handful of individuals. We call these people capitalists. Thanks to this ownership over the means of production, which from now on I'll just call private property, capitalists get a lot of privileges.
Which is different than personal property, for the record. That's the other common meta where people will be like, oh, the socialists want to come take your toothbrush. You can't even have a toothbrush. It's like, no, private property is not the same as personal property. My house, for example, would be personal property. Okay? If I were to move out of this house, purchase another one, and then rent this one out as a landlord, it would be private property. Private property is property that you own with the express purpose of engaging in capital accumulation. Just so you guys understand. That's what that little note explained on the screen as well. I'm just describing it to you. Okay? This is the distinction. The idea that like no one should have ownership over anything is stupid. That is not the argument that socialists make. Maybe some people make that argument, but they're fucking insane, okay?
Namely profit, and have a large degree of authority. They are not elected to their role or representative of society in any meaningful way. Capitalists just own stuff. And that means they can make any number of decisions concerning work.
What if you work out of your room like you? Not meant to be a gotcha? What are you talking about? Oh my God. Okay. Chatter. I'm working out of this room. It is still my house that I live inside of. Okay? If you take fucking calls from, when you work for a company and you take calls from your home or you work from home, that doesn't turn into private property. The distinction is making money without actually working. Capital accumulation. Capital accumulation is when you make money without working, okay? When you put your money in the stock market, that's capital accumulation. Why are you always so angry? Because it's like a super basic, it is a super basic designation. Renting out your space would be a form of private property, a form of capital accumulation. And there's also room for that as well. The difference, of course, is landlords over like regular real estate that people need to survive. This would be a great example of, this would be a perfect example of capital accumulation through private property. Chatter asks, what if there wasn't an accusation there? What if Chatter's feelings got hurt, big dog? Like you got to add so much extra info to that question too? What are you saying?
Privileged social status, and can heavily influence politics without much accountability. At the end of the day, the only
yeah, it is accumulating value regardless of being rented out or just say your fucking TV or gaming PC. Exactly. Your car is your personal property. Purchase a fleet of cars and rent them out to people. You're not working. It's just, it's generating value for you. It turns into private property. But even then, it's not, even then, it doesn't, I'm getting a headache. That's why I have a short fuse. I'm sorry.
The thing capitalists are accountable to is profit, and making more of it than their competitors. If capitalists so choose, they can make more profit by slashing wages, extending working hours, or worsening working conditions, and they're just allowed to. The people who work for them, basically everybody else on planet Earth, are usually only able to resist these decisions up to a point. If workers don't agree with the decisions their employers make, it's not like they can elect a new boss or make the decisions themselves. In the balance of power, capitalists are clearly on top. So if workers refuse to carry out their boss's decisions, they run the risk of getting fired, with all the horrible consequences that can bring. Ultimately then, the choice offered up by capitalism is either you agree with your boss, the unelected figure whose primary objective is getting more money, often at your expense, or you suffer the consequences. To pay for shelter, food, and healthcare, you need to agree to the terms set by at least one capitalist and sign a job contract. There is no other option. And wouldn't you know it, there's a whole channel dedicated to the various awful consequences of this economic model. Socialism radically opposes this fundamental characteristic of capitalism. Under socialism, individual ownership is substituted by collective ownership. In other words, workers own and operate the factories, businesses, and so on themselves. It's like a union on steroids. Decisions are not made by random individuals with capital trying to get more of it, but rather through democratic institutions guided by the concrete goals of improving people's lives, not simply making the number bigger and assuming the two things go together. In practice, collective ownership can take many forms, like a centrally planned economy, a network of freely associated communes, a system of co-ops, a mix of these things, or even a whole different set of things entirely. There's no one universally agreed upon answer to how this system should be organized, and it's one of the biggest things socialists talk about. One thing is very clear though, and it's that the economy should not be run with two separate classes of owners and workers. The class system should be abolished entirely, and the decisions society makes around work and production should not be guided by profit, but by democracy. Socialism is, at its very basic level, nothing more than this. Either the means of production are owned privately, and it's capitalism, or they are owned collectively, and it's socialism. Honestly, I just went really fast, so if you want a video dedicated to the definition of these terms, here's a good one I like to recommend. There, that wasn't so bad, right? With this definition, we now have a test. To figure out if the Nazis were socialists, we can examine their discourse and their actions, and determine if they supported socialist causes, resisted capitalism and sought to abolish private property, or, on the contrary, if they supported capitalism. But first, the obvious stuff. One of the first things Nazis did when Hitler took office as German Chancellor was get rid of the socialists. Using as a pretext a fire in the German parliament, Hitler triggered a state of emergency and kicked into high gear his repressive politics against both Jewish people and communists. Members of the Communist Party,
which they also saw as like, Jewish. That's the other thing, which was that, communism was seen as like Jewish trickery.
Were tracked down and imprisoned by Nazi police. The party itself was functionally outlawed, removed from parliament, and its members were pushed into either exile or prison. In fact, the sudden boom in prison populations from targeting the communists led to the creation of some of the first concentration camps, filled with socialists before becoming one of the
Judeo-Bolshevism, Jewish communism, Jewish socialism, Jewish Marxism, cultural Marxism. Interesting. Interesting. How did that? Wow. Language evolves,
major sites of the Jewish genocide. Soon enough, this repression of political opponents would go beyond the communists and extend further right to the Social Democratic Party. In the end, both parties that represented labor in the German parliament, whether revolutionary or reformist, were cut out of the political process entirely. All this was part of Hitler and the Nazis' plan against so-called Judeo-Bolshevism, the name of the conspiracy theory which claimed that socialism was nothing more than a Jewish plot to undermine so-called ethnic German society. To complete this effort, Hitler also cracked down on organized labor. Union leaders and prominent members were hunted down in much the same way the communist politicians were, and were beaten, killed, and imprisoned en masse by Nazi stormtroopers. All trade unions were first occupied,
Donald Trump working at McDonald's,
then banned, except for the German Labor Front, a union created and functionally controlled by the Nazi Party. Collective bargaining and strikes were gone, and all that was left of the labor movement was the puppet union the Nazi Party had set up, which failed even the most basic function of a labor union by bringing employees and employers under the same roof. The whole purpose of labor unions is to be a force of opposition to capitalist authority. Making the two share an institution effectively kills any leverage that workers have, and this was, of course, the point. On top of all this, the deaths and the destruction, the GLF's leader was appointed by the Nazi Party, not by union members, and therefore, the organization heavily tipped the scale towards capitalists. In just a few short months, the Nazis had destroyed labor militancy altogether. But that's not all. You might remember that the Nazis were famous.
Oh yeah, nowadays they don't say Judeo-Bolshevism, they say Islamo-leftism, right? Islamo-leftism. That's the thing that, because European fascists, they need an enemy. They need an outsider enemy, you know what I mean? You gotta have one. Islamo-gauchism. That's what it is.
As for their book burnings. Unsurprisingly, these same anti-socialist politics were obvious there too. Many of the authors whose books were burned were central figures in socialist politics.
Wait, I thought they were... My favorite political commentator said that they were burned because the books were written in Jewish. I don't know if I agree with what this guy is saying.
Like Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, Vladimir Lenin, Rosa Luxemburg.
Wait, so these guys didn't write in Jewish?
Leon Trotsky, and many others. A conscious effort was made by the Nazi Party and their sympathizers to destroy socialist literature because, generally speaking, the Nazis were desperate to destroy just about every outlet for socialist politics. All told, these measures are why that famous poem starts with the line, "First they came for the communists." That is just what the Nazis did. They crushed the parties that championed socialist politics, the books that legitimized these politics analytically, and the labor movements that brought these politics into the world by giving workers power. But all these events have been brushed under the rug or presented by conservatives as nothing more than socialist infighting, based on evidence?
Heard left-wing brothers say shit like, if Muslims and brown people come here, that will turn Europe fascist, so I'm against them. Yeah, that's a liberal talking right there. Oh my God, a social fascist, if you will, because that's the guy that says, "Look, I'm not racist, but other people are racist, and they'll be racist if more of the inferior race comes here, and then it will be impossible to combat these other races." Not me, I'm not. The idea that you shouldn't be actively combating that kind of rhetoric, but instead caving and capitulating to that kind of rhetoric and saying it is actually not the growing racist movement that is responsible for the racism, but instead people to be racist too, is ridiculous. Yeah, it's cultural Marxism in the US and Islamo-Marxism in France specifically, and also with Persian Shah supporters.
Which it clearly wasn't. Socialists are usually not too keen on burning Marx's books or hunting down labor union leaders. And as a little bonus proof of this divide,
I hate libs, but don't use Stalinist terms for non-Stalinists, man. I don't care. If it's correct, it's correct. You know what I mean? What are you talking about? Like, I mean, he cooked on that one. He wasn't wrong on that one.
Between socialists and Nazis, neither the Nazis nor the socialists ever considered themselves or each other to be part of the same political family. Something they made very clear by their seats in the German parliament. But since this last point is only a little stronger than the "it's in their name" argument, let's go back to the more concrete stuff. The Nazis were both a tool of German capitalists and promoters of the capitalist economy. It's not simply that they crushed labor power and leftist politicians. They actively furthered the interest of capitalists at a time where capitalism was in a bit of a troubled spot, to put it mildly. The first thing we can look at to make these arguments is the institutional support from capitalists that the Nazis received. In short, quite a lot. German industrialists helped promote Hitler's rise to power in every way they could. Capitalists from some of Germany's largest economic sectors invested millions of Reichsmarks, upwards of $30 million today, to prevent the Nazi Party from succumbing to its financial difficulties and to help the party win elections. And to bolster their financial support with symbolic pressure, industry leaders also wrote and co-signed a letter sent to Hindenburg, then president of Germany, imploring him to appoint Hitler as chancellor to quell quote-unquote class antagonisms. In other words, large capitalists wanted Hitler's leadership to deal with the rise of socialism. Whether this support was decided...
This is why sometimes liberals will get really horny and will openly state that it was actually the growth of communist and revolutionary movements in Germany that created ample ground for the Nazi regime to take power, which is kind of like what your quote-unquote social fascist leftist friend was saying about the people becoming more racist because, you know, Muslims are coming into the country. We can't let Muslims come into the country because we can't have these people become more racist. Okay, so you agree with what their agenda is, which is to not let people come into the country that they have declared inferior. You might not think that they're inferior, but it kind of feels like you do think that they might be a little inferior, you know? What liberals are saying that? What do you mean? Oh, dude. Back in the day, I used to do a lot more history or theory-focused streams where liberals would actively say that. Like, I've duped it out with liberals. I'm shocked that there isn't actually a liberal in here right now still advocating for this, claiming that it was actually how scary the communists were that made liberals lean into the Nazi party.
Decisive in Hitler's victory is up for debate. But what is undeniable is that it proves the close relationship between the two camps. And this relationship served a purpose. The Great Depression, the economic burden of the Treaty of Versailles, and the various bourgeois governments that ruled Germany under the Weimar Republic prompted more and more Germans to look for an alternative to capitalism. Specifically, they turned to socialism. Between 1928 and 1932, for example, the Communist Party more than doubled its membership. People were turning to the left en masse and at an unprecedented pace. The Communist Party was still a parliamentary minority, to be sure, but industrialists feared that these trends would continue and that socialism would come to end their monopoly over the means of production. What's more, German workers had recently won the right to unionize and secured the 8-hour workday and unemployment insurance.
German Revolution succeeds. Business plot fails still. FDR becomes an overt socialist. They pack up Imperial Japan fairly quickly. and Italy is dealt with as well. Good timeline. The world has evolved beyond capitalism. Global communism. Global fully automated communism is implemented. Stalin helped Spain. I mean, there is no there. That is such an alternative vision of history that like it's fucking impossible to imagine, because now you're thinking the USSR doesn't have 20 million dead. Like the sky's the limit at that point. No longer as nowhere near as paranoid, and has significantly more power. China is completely and instantly controlled by Maoists. Very different timeline.
No one knew how far these trends would go, and capitalists couldn't afford to find out. It is in this context that the Nazis and industrialists found common ground, with the industrialists hoping the more authoritarian character of the fascist platform would be used to quell labor, and the Nazis hoping to use the industrialists' funds to conquer power and enact their reactionary, anti-Semitic program. Okay, so far we have two strong pieces of evidence for the capitalist character of the Nazis: the political repression of labor parties and unions, and the institutional support of the capitalist class. That's pretty good, but we can do even better by looking at what the German economy was like during Nazi rule, and how it differed from the economy of other capitalist nations and socialism. Nazis were big on privatization, the process of taking publicly owned companies and services and handing them over to capitalists. To quote a paper on the topic, "It is a fact that the government of the Nazi Party sold off public ownership in several state-owned firms in the mid-1930s. These firms belonged to a wide range of sectors: steel, mining, banking, local public utilities, shipyards, ship lines, railways, etc. In addition, the delivery of some public services that were produced by the government prior to the 1930s, especially social and labor-related services, was transferred to the private sector. In doing so, they went against the mainstream trends in the—
What happened? The great privatizer? Is that socialism, I guess? Socialism is when you cooperate with capitalists and also undermine labor unions, kill socialists, put them in concentration camps, and then privatize formerly state-owned sectors. This is real socialism, I think.
in the Western capitalist.
Yeah, if this is socialism, then Trump is a socialist, I guess. Maybe a national socialist of the Hitler variety, it seems.
Countries, none of which systematically reprivatized firms during the 1930s. The Nazis were unique in their commitment to privatize, and the economic landscape that resulted from this process, and Nazi rule more generally, ended up being a particular variant of capitalism. The Nazis ensured that capitalist ownership would continue under their rule, and even encouraged it with the privatizations process. Free market principles still applied to large sectors of the economy, and organized labor was out of the picture, but the Nazis retained the ability to guide economic production when it suited their needs, usually to promote imperialist or wartime goals. This is not unusual. Even the US took the reins on production during the war. But this will often get brought up as an argument that the Nazis were somehow socialists, despite clearly expanding the privatization process and balancing that with the necessity to organize the war. To summarize then, more privatization, some state direction, no labor resistance, and plenty of capitalists. What results is an economy that could only be called socialism if your definition of socialism never addressed the question of private property. In other words, the most basic concern of socialist politics.
Yeah.
And if you believe that all socialism is when the government does stuff.
So the only reason why Nazis call themselves socialists is just to appeal to the general public? Yes. Yes. This is why I've always been particularly fearful of the dangerous propaganda coming from the Tucker Carlsons of the world, who understand that there is left populism, who understand that there is a lot of momentum for left populism, and will use it to drive home their dangerous agenda of nationalism. Yes, because the reality of the matter is nationalism not only is a dangerous idea, but if you were to look at it, if you were to just like remove morality from this equation for a brief moment, it is diametrically opposed to any kind of socialist agenda. Like nationalism is pure idealism. It's not materialist at all. The notion that The notion that you are a superior race or you are a superior nation, like, this is ridiculous. It's not real. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just fucking fake bullshit that you've told yourself over and over again until you fucking believe it because you're a fucking loser and you need to hold on to some ideal that, like, no, you were destined for more, and then they just like robbed you of your potential somehow. That's it. It's just not a real concept. It's just completely made up. I am a firm and committed believer that every single person, and not even a committed believer, I guess, more so like the observable reality that, you know, every single person is who they are and who they become directly as a consequence of their material conditions. The more liberalized version of that sentiment is something that you hear from the field of sociology, or even something that liberals also will say from time to time, which is your zip code determines your future. Your zip code is a better predictor of your future than anything else. The zip code that you were born into, like the house that you grew up in, because it's true. Are there fuck ups along the way? Certainly, but ultimately, your family's financial circumstances, your level of affluence, like, it plays a very important role in where you get and who you become. I myself am a living, breathing example of this. My beginnings are affluent. My family lost all of its wealth by the time I got to college. And look where I'm at now. The only reason why I was able to get to this point is because I think when I was growing up, I had the best education and never had to worry about the economic pressures and having to work while also keep up with school, things of that nature. This is like, this all plays a very important role in the fact that I was born in the United States of America, like, to have citizenship. These are all incredibly important aspects of how I was able to get to the point that I got to. That's all shit that I didn't do personally, you know?
A grossly misguided definition of socialism that would make every society on Earth, for almost all of human civilization, socialist. Nazi Germany was capitalist, and the Nazis made sure of that. Of course, while this whole video has been making a strong case for the Nazis were not socialist argument, it's important to note a few.
But you're still a wealth hoarder, so that means you're a part of the capitalist problem? Yes, I am a wealth hoarder. Yeah. You cracked the code, chatter. You did. Thank you for the 1 month that you have given me $5. I'm your enemy. I promise. Dude. I'm the guy that you should be mad at. You're right. That was gifted. Okay, well, I'm curious if Hassan feels that the wealth they hoard is combated by claiming to be humanist. Would a humanist hoard wealth from other humans? People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of their people. MAGA is Rage Against the Machine. Wow, what the fuck? This guy's all over the place. Not $5, $6. Mickey Baby the Prince, allowing me to hoard even more wealth with the 20 gifted subs. Thank you. Are those CI videos in the React pipeline? While I don't think you're my enemy, I think you lose some people by the fact of your wealth. Yes, my friend, those people are stupid. What the fuck do you want me to do? Live in a hovel? Like, what is this? It's so stupid. Like, what kind of house I live in, or the housing market that is completely outside of my control, that greatly overinflates the value of this house, even though I consistently advocate to lower housing prices, which would technically lower the value of my house as well. But I don't give a fuck about that because I'm not using this house as a financial vehicle to accrue more wealth, but instead as shelter. Hold on. I have a headache. It's aesthetics. It's optics. It's how you make your money that matters. And it's what you do with all of the time and all of the free time that I have that matters. And I don't know why people still do that over and over again. I don't know why. I mean, I guess I get it. It's propaganda. But it's so funny because people that say this, and I repeated this before, it's like people say, oh, dude, you claim to be a socialist and yet you have money. This is diametrically opposed to socialism. It's not, but let's just entertain that notion for a second. And yet here you are, a worker defending capitalism, defending the capitalist system. Or even if you're not, your demand is that I advocate for what you declare is my class position. You're saying, hey, You should be like the other rich guys and demand that the system that gives you so much continue to give you more. Why are you not doing that? I'm not doing that because I don't believe that. It's that simple. Ludwig's friend Stans made a video about your wealth a few days ago. Wait, really? The fuck? I'll never forgive you for owning a home. House on Piker.
Few slightly more valid counterarguments, and why they don't ultimately change this conclusion. For starters, like all political parties, the Nazis had internal divisions, and it's true that some of the party's notable early members had anti-capitalist motivations, and even disagreed with the general pro-capitalist direction of the party and Hitler himself. However, the reason this fact is not ultimately damning to our greater argument is that these anti-capitalist Nazis were still fiercely and primordially nationalistic and racist, and therefore in contradiction with the internationalist and egalitarian ideals baked into socialist politics.
You watched this, but not the video of the guy Hamas just killed? Kek W? Wait, what? What the fuck? What are you even saying? Are you okay? Why did you say Kek W after that too? What?
But perhaps more convincing than a theoretical inconsistency is
no, you should be using the wealth you've accumulated to provide for those without. Great. That's a great suggestion. I do that already. Is this yet another moment where because you don't see it, that means it's not happening? Is that what is going on? It's turned into yet another instance where like I didn't see you, so I think it's not happening and it's your fault. Is that what it is? It's also funny because it's like, I've talked about this before, where charity is not socialism. If I were to be able to get a bunch of other people and get them all together and say, hey, we're making a pact and we're just turning ourselves into a 501c3. Okay. That would not even put a dent in the financial inequalities that will persist in the aftermath of that. Redistributive policies such as that one, especially from like individuals of my level of wealth and not even like the Elon Musks of the world, will not solve these systematic problems that persist. Everything that I do works to try and undermine the current systems that are causing this level of wealth inequality by trying to do as much awareness as possible. Having said that, I still do a good deal of that, a good deal of mutual aid.
Is the fact that these anti-capitalist Nazis all became irrelevant.
Ironically enough, when I do that, people say I do it for show. That's the other side of this equation. I do it privately, they say you don't do it. I do it publicly, they say you're doing it for show. Why don't you do it privately? I do it privately, and then it comes out later down the line. People just kind of don't talk about that. So there's not really... This is precisely the reason why I always say to others who come to me and ask me like, oh, why? Well, people always chirp at me like for doing this and doing that. I'm like, just do fucking right by others, man. Who cares about all the noise? Fuck them.
To the Nazi project almost immediately. The few which even existed in the first place were either convinced by Hitler to abandon these anti-capitalist positions, as was the case for Goebbels, or were killed in the Night of Long Knives, early on in the Nazi Party's rule. If the Nazi Party ever had a trace of socialist politics, it was gone by the time it mattered, and the party freely embraced the preservation of a capitalist economy once in power. Secondly, this video started with a long and frankly...
I think people just fucking hate you because you're well off. I don't think people hate me, but those who do don't hate me because I'm well off. Those who do hate me because of what I'm saying while also being well off. Because there's a million people out there that are well off, but don't spend every fucking waking moment trying to do agitative propaganda. I always use the example of, what's his face? Like, the dude with the sexy voice that plays video games. What was his name? I'm forgetting. Oh my God, I'm blanking out. He's a Markiplier. Markiplier is a perfect example of someone who is infinitely more well off than myself, but he doesn't brand himself as a socialist. Why the fuck should he? He keeps his political positions close to his chest, but is a genuinely really good guy, a really nice guy. Okay? And for that reason, ain't nobody's getting mad at him for whenever he comes out and does something nice. Nobody turns around and goes, oh, he's just doing it because he's fake, he's a phony. And I don't think so either, by the way. I think he's just a good dude, right? But nobody has that same level of smoke for him, you know? Y'all can make any excuses and narrate to yourselves whatever insanity you would like. Wealth hoarding is the problem. Wealth hoarding is a problem. You're not wrong about this. But the solutions to wealth hoarding, you are wrong on. Wealth hoarding is a problem born out of systematic enforcement. It's a failure of the system. Just like every homeless person is an indication that the system has failed, every billionaire is an indication that the system has also failed. So your solution to this is to yell at a Twitch streamer who's trying to unlock class consciousness. So stop doing it. I'm not doing it. You're fucking stupid. I don't know how else to describe this to you. You just don't like the fancy, flashy shit that you see on screen. That's it. How is this yelling? Wait, what? Yes. I had these exact same beliefs when I didn't have money, and people said, you're just projecting rage onto me is hilarious. Okay, man. All right. You're right. It seems like you're a little bit upset because you think you're suggesting that I'm doing this thing that I'm not doing. And you're doubling, tripling, quadrupling down and hyper focusing on this. And I don't know how to get you to understand. I'm trying to be as charitable as possible to you. But I don't think it's happening. I don't think it's gonna happen. Maybe. Anyway, as I was stating earlier, wealth hoarding and wealth inequality is born out of capitalism. It is a normal part of the process. It's a normal outcome of the process. Okay? So you have to undermine and change the way that the system works in order to tackle this issue. Have a good day, chat. Thanks for being so willing to have the conversations. I like that he's not even talking to me now. He's like, chat is having a good conversation with him. I'm not, because I'm a bad guy.
Boring definition of socialism for a reason. I did this on purpose because although Hitler had the word socialism in the name of his party, he also made every effort to distance this word from its original definition, a trick which we continue to see used today to try and associate the Nazis with socialist politics. Hitler wanted nothing to do with the actual definition of socialism, the abolishing of private property, so he made sure the word would only ever mean something else to his audience, whether that was by calling real socialism a Jewish conspiracy, captured in the phrases Judeo-Bolshevism and Jewish Marxism.
It seems like he's giving his heart out here. It feels like he's giving his heart out. Y'all are in a cult? It's shocking. Chatter. I hope you have a great day.
Or to redefine the word into some vague form of nationalism.
I think you just want to be heard, and it's fine. I think that's a very normal, very human need. You want to be heard. You want to feel like a human. You want to draw some reaction out of people. Now, you can do that in a positive way, or you can do that in a negative way. You're doing a negative one. You should try and do it in a positive way, okay?
Like in the passages I'm putting up on screen, Hitler was intent on socialism becoming a hollow vessel for his politics, a marketing tool that he could use to trigger mass appeal and play up nationalist sentiments without ever delivering socialist politics. Finally, there are plenty of other things I wish this video could have touched on. The writings of Mussolini on the nature of fascism and the anti-communist belief that animated it, some quotes on screen right now, the social Darwinism of fascist ideology that legitimized capitalist hierarchy and made a socialist economy antithetical to fascist projects, the reactionary patriarchal, anti-Semitic, and homophobic beliefs that inform Nazi politics, and plenty of claims made by the right about the Nazis that completely misrepresent Nazi rule. But with only 20 minutes and a schedule of one video a week, this is pretty much as far as I can go.